So if you want to see the ruins of an ancient empire, you go to Rome.
Right.
I mean, you look at the crumbling pillars, the overgrown temples, the dust. It's obvious.
Yeah, it's very physical.
Exactly. You point at the Colosseum and say, there it is. That's where it all fell apart. But if you want to see the ruins of modern economic theory,
Oh, man.
the exact place where the absolute smartest mathematical formulas on Earth just went to die, you don't look for broken stone. You go to Tokyo.
Yeah, that is a chilling way to frame it. But honestly, it's entirely accurate.
Right.
The devastation there isn't architectural, It's hidden. It's buried in bank ledgers and, well, decades of completely flatlined wages.
And this is the massive misconception we have to clear up immediately for you today. Ask anyone on the street why Japan suffered the lost 30 years.
Right, this endless economic stagnation.
Yeah. And they will give you a comforting illusion. They'll say, oh, it's an aging population.
Yep. Or they call it a demographic time bomb.
Or maybe they just assume, the workforce lost its edge. They weren't working hard enough.
Which is just wild.
Yeah.
But we love those narratives, don't we?
We do.
Because they put the problem in this neat little demographic box. It doesn't threaten our own financial reality.
But it is completely false.
Totally false.
The real reason for Japan's missing decades is hidden in a really terrifying cold reality.
Yeah.
The absolute pinnacle of global monetary magic, the most aggressive, highly engineered economic theories ever devised by human minds. They were deployed in Tokyo.
And they turned into worthless scrap paper.
Worthless.
I mean, we aren't just talking about a Japanese problem today.
Yeah.
We are talking about a catastrophic failure in the fundamental mechanics of how humanity believes money works.
Right.
We're looking at what happens when these incredibly arrogant mathematical models just crash headfirst into the messy, traumatized reality of human psychology.
So welcome to this deep dive. Our mission today is serious, and, well, it's going to challenge everything you think you know about central banking.
Prepare to have your worldview slapped around a bit.
Exactly. Our source material today is this mind-bending working paper from the National Bureau of Economic Research, paper number 23707.
Right, written by Mark Gertler.
Yeah. Now, Gertler is an economics professor at New York University.
He is.
But that's not really why we're listening to him, is it?
No, not at all. We're listening to him because he was an actual boots-on-the-ground, outside advisor to the Bank of Japan.
He had a front row seat to the collapse of the models.
The ultimate insider view. He wrote this piece right in the thick of the aftermath. He was preparing it for an annual conference inside the Bank of Japan itself in 2017.
Wow.
Yeah, he was standing in the very halls where these disastrously ineffective decisions were made, trying to explain to the architects why their building collapsed.
So we are going to explore this concept called the forward guidance puzzle.
A huge puzzle.
We're going to uncover how the smartest economists on Earth arrogantly assumed that everyday humans were, well, essentially psychic calculators.
Which is just crazy.
It is. We'll track how those illusions completely shattered. And most importantly, we'll explore why the economic black hole that swallowed Japan might actually be coming for you next.
The stakes here, they really cannot be overstated. Following the 2008 financial crisis, advanced economies around the globe plunged into a trap.
Right.
But Japan's problem was the canary in the coal mine. Their crisis started decades earlier, right after their own massive real estate and stock market bubble burst in the late 80s.
Yeah.
The desperate maneuvers they attempted and, the reasons those maneuvers failed. They serve as a massive warning sign for the U.S., for Europe, and for China today.
So let's start with a brutal collision between the textbook and reality. I want to take you back to the spring of 2013.
Okay, set in the scene.
The Bank of Japan unleashes a policy called QQE, quantitative and qualitative easing.
Right, but let's just forget the jargon.
Yeah, forget the jargon. Think of it as the ultimate aggressive money printing magic.
The bazooka.
The bazooka. They were slamming the pedal to the metal, trying to flood the Japanese economy with cash to just force it back to life.
And to understand the scale of this, you really have to look at the mechanics. The Bank of Japan wasn't just, tweaking interest rates.
Yeah.
They were stepping into the open market and buying massive, unprecedented amounts of government bonds and other financial assets.
Huge amounts.
Right. And by buying those assets, they were injecting trillions of yen directly into the financial system.
Just flooding the zone.
Exactly. And they also publicly committed to a massive inflation target. They did everything the modern macroeconomic textbook said you absolutely must do to shock an economy out of a coma.
According to those textbooks, the reaction should have been explosive.
Boom. Strong economic recovery.
Right. If a central bank prints that much money and commits to that much inflation, the models dictate that prices must go up.
They have to.
Consumers are supposed to look at all this money printing, realize their cash will be worth less tomorrow, and rush out to spend it today.
That's the theory.
It should have ignited a booming recovery, but what was the reality?
Total silence.
Nothing.
Just continuous grinding deflation.
It's wild. It was as if the central bank dropped a financial nuclear bomb and the economy didn't even blink.
Barely a ripple. And that lack of reaction, it completely shattered the worldview of global economists.
Totally.
In the standard models, the transmission line from a central bank's massive policy shift right down to your wallet, it's supposed to be relatively immediate.
But the Japanese economy remains stubbornly frozen.
Completely frozen. And Gertler makes a really crucial point here. You can't just blame this on the Bank of Japan making a technical mistake anymore.
Right, they weren't messing up the implementation.
No, since 2013, they implemented a state-of-the-art policy program. They executed the textbook perfectly.
And the textbook proved to be totally useless.
Less than useless.
Which brings us to Gertler's brutal diagnosis of his own profession.
This is where it gets spicy.
Yeah, the brains behind the global central banks. The folks at the Fed, the European Central Bank, the Bank of Japan. They made a fatal, arrogant mistake.
They did.
They massively overestimated the magic of the future.
Yeah, the central flaw really lies in what standard models predict a central bank can accomplish when they were stuck.
Stuck, yeah.
These models, the exact mathematical frameworks used for forecasting at the highest levels of global finance, they assumed that you can successfully stimulate a debt economy simply by managing the public's expectations of future policy.
Okay, let's break down why an economy gets stuck in the first place. Because the mechanics here are fascinating.
They really are.
I like to think of interest rates like temperature.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right. When you lower interest rates, you heat up the economy, but eventually you hit 0%.
And hitting 0% interest is like hitting absolute zero in physics.
Exactly. At absolute zero, atoms literally freeze.
Everything stops moving.
In an economy, when rates hit zero, traditional central bank tools freeze solid.
And that is the concept economists call the zero lower bound.
The dreaded ZLB.
Right. Under normal conditions, if an economy slows down, the central bank cuts the interest rate. By doing that, they lower the cost of borrowing.
So a local bakery realizes a loan is cheap, so they borrow money to buy a new oven.
Exactly. Or a family realizes mortgage rates are down, so they buy a house.
And that borrowing and spending speeds the economy back up.
But what happens when that rate hits zero? You can't just keep cutting.
Well, no, you can't. Because if a bank charges you a negative interest rate on your savings...
Meaning you actually have to pay them to hold your money.
Right. You will eventually just pull all your cash out and bury it in your backyard.
Exactly. So zero acts as a hard floor. When you hit that floor, the traditional monetary policy transmission just violently snaps.
It breaks.
The economy falls off a cliff into what is known as a balance sheet recession.
A balance sheet recession. Okay, let's make that real for you listening. Imagine you run a small business and you are drowning in debt from a market crash. The bank calls you up and says, hey, great news. Interest rates are at zero. You can borrow money for free to expand your business.
You're going to look at them like they're absolutely insane.
Right. You don't want to expand. You have no customers. You just want to survive and pay down the massive debt you already have. Even free money won't make you spend.
And that is exactly the dynamic. The private sector becomes entirely focused on debt minimization rather than profit maximization.
Wow.
So traditional rate cuts are dead. The economy is trapped at the absolute zero of the zero lower bound.
Which poses the ultimate dilemma for these central bankers. If we cannot cut rates today because they are already frozen at zero, what on earth do we do to force people to spend?
Well, this is where they introduce their supposed genius solution, forward guidance.
Forward guidance.
Right. Since the central bank is powerless to change the reality of today, they decide to make a solemn public promise about tomorrow. They loudly announce to the world, hey, we swear to you, we will not raise interest rates in the future. Even when the economy finally recovers and starts running hot, we will keep rates at zero.
So they are desperately trying to borrow prosperity from tomorrow.
Yes.
The theory is wild when you really look at it. The central bank is betting that if you, the everyday citizen, believe that borrowing will be incredibly cheap for years to come, and that inflation will be allowed to run hot in the future,
Right.
you will behave differently today.
Yeah, the intention is pure psychological manipulation.
Mhm.
I mean, they want you to do the math in your head.
Right.
They want you to think, well, the central bank promises inflation will be high in 3 years. That means the cash in my savings account is going to lose its purchasing power.
So I need to get rid of it.
Exactly. I need to protect my wealth by spending it now. I should buy that car or build that factory immediately before prices go up.
I have to pause here. I just need to call out how absurd this assumes humans behave.
Oh, it's completely out of touch.
Does just promising something years from now actually make people empty their wallets today? I mean, think about your own life.
Right.
If a bank governor goes on television and says, hey, in 5 years, we are going to keep interest rates really low, do you immediately jump off your couch and go finance a refrigerator?
Of course not.
No. You have to worry about paying your electric bill this month.
Your skepticism is dead on. But here is the terrifying part. The mathematical models used by the central banks, they didn't just assume forward guidance would work a little bit.
Right.
They assumed it was an unbelievable, godlike magic trick.
A magic trick.
Yeah, this glitch in the matrix is what the economic literature actually calls the forward guidance puzzle.
The puzzle. Okay, I want to lean into this because it is an incredible, face-slapping, counterintuitive absurdity.
It really is.
The mainstream models literally predicted that the further out into the future a central bank promises to keep rates low, the exponentially stronger the stimulus effect is today.
Yeah, the math in the standard New Keynesian models dictates exactly that.
Wait.
If a central bank promises an interest rate cut next month, it provides a modest boost to the economy today.
Well,
But if they promise that same interest rate cut 5 years from now, the models claim the stimulus today should be massive.
that makes zero sense.
I know. As the horizon of the promise extends further into the future, the theoretical power of that promise multiplies.
Wait, I really want everyone to grasp how insane that is. You're telling me the official models say a promise to keep rates low in the year 2030 makes me want to buy a car today more than a promise to keep rates low next Tuesday.
In the rigid reality of the mathematical model, yes.
That is just broken.
It defies all common sense. But the mechanics behind why the model predicts this are fascinating. It relies on a toxic combination of two academic concepts, general equilibrium effects and rational expectations.
Okay, we need to translate those into English immediately. How does this infinite loop of logic actually work?
Okay, so in the model's perfect sterile world, people don't just think about their own individual wallet.
Right.
They are omniscient. They calculate how the entire global economy will react to a policy.
Wow.
So an individual citizen hears a promise for low rates in 5 years. They say to themselves, the central bank will keep rates low in 5 years. That will cause a massive economic boom in 5 years.
Okay.
Because there will be a boom, the factory I work at will hire more people, and everyone's wages will skyrocket in 5 years.
I see where this is going.
Because I know with absolute certainty my wages will be higher in 5 years, my lifetime wealth has already increased. Therefore, I feel vastly richer right now, today. So I will go spend a fortune today.
And because the model assumes every single human being thinks exactly like this simultaneously, it creates a massive feedback loop.
But huge loop.
I buy a car because you buy a house because we both know a factory will open in 5 years.
Exactly.
It predicts an explosive, immediate economic recovery today based entirely on a distant, invisible tomorrow.
Precisely. And to make matters worse, these models feature zero discounting of future promises.
What does that mean?
Well, in the real world, if I promise to give you $20 tomorrow, you probably believe me.
Sure.
If I promise to give you $20 in 10 years, you assign almost zero value to that promise.
Yeah, I've never seen that $20.
Exactly. But the New Keynesian models treat a promise made for 5 years from now with the exact same weight, urgency, and certainty as a promise made for tomorrow morning.
That's just a severe error in the model.
It is the forward guidance puzzle. It completely defies human nature, yet every major central bank treated it like a holy text.
How is that even possible? How did the smartest people in the room, the ones with PhDs from MIT and Harvard, build models that are so completely disconnected from how you and I actually live and breathe?
Well, it all stems from their foundational belief in something called rational expectations.
Rational expectations.
This is the absolute bedrock of modern macroeconomics. It assumes that human beings are hyper-rational, forward-looking calculators.
Right.
It assumes we perfectly understand macroeconomic policy, and we immediately adjust our behavior based on complex forecasts.
It assumes we are all psychic gods.
Pretty much.
The model genuinely thinks I am sitting at my kitchen table, sipping coffee, running differential equations about the central bank's 10-year inflation targets, and flawlessly predicting the future of the global supply chain before I decide whether to buy a new pair of shoes.
And Mark Gertler brings the receipts to prove exactly how delusional that assumption really is.
Let's hear it.
He looks at the actual data, and it is a brutal reality check. He examines the United States survey of professional forecasters from the decade spanning 2007 to 2017.
Okay, so these are not everyday citizens trying to pay a mortgage.
No. These are the absolute professionals, Wall Street analysts, institutional economists. Their entire full-time job is to predict the economy.
If anyone qualifies as a psychic god in the rational expectation model, it should be these people.
Exactly. But did they predict the future?
Let me guess.
No.
Absolutely not. Gertler tracks their median forecasts for core inflation against what actually happened in the real world.
When the 2008 financial crash hit, actual inflation plummeted rapidly. But the expert forecasts completely missed the drop.
They didn't see the biggest crash of our generation coming.
Not only did they not see it coming, their reactions were incredibly sluggish. The actual inflation rate would drop, and the forecasters would only adjust their predictions downward after the reality had already hit them in the face.
Wow.
Their forecast errors were highly serially correlated.
Wait, let's break that down. Serially correlated means they kept making the exact same mistake over and over, quarter after quarter.
Yes, they were constantly chasing the data. Actual inflation would tick up in 2010, and their expectations lagged behind again. They were never anticipating the future. They were merely tracing the recent past.
So the psychic gods weren't looking into a crystal ball at all.
Not even close.
They were driving a car while looking exclusively in the rearview mirror.
That is the perfect way to put it. And the failure is even more staggering when you look at economic growth. Gertler looks at the U.S. GDP data from the exact same survey. In 2008, the actual GDP of the United States fell off a cliff.
Right.
It crashed down to -8%.
Negative 8%. That is absolute carnage. Millions of jobs vanishing. Where were the forecasters while the cliff was approaching?
Totally oblivious. As the economy was actively collapsing, their forecasts for the next quarter remained wildly, unjustifiably optimistic.
You're kidding?
Nope. They completely missed the turn. And then once the pain of the recession was fully entrenched, they awkwardly revised their predictions downward.
Slowly catching up to reality.
Right. If you look at the timeline of their predictions on Gertler's chart, they're literally shifted to the right, heavily delayed.
This brings us to a really crucial psychological concept. Path dependence.
Yes.
Our predictions for the future are chained to our current suffering. We aren't rational calculators projecting future central bank policy. We are just extending our past trauma into the future. If things are terrible today, we assume they will be terrible tomorrow. If prices fell yesterday, we assume they will fall tomorrow.
Which forces us to ask a very difficult question.
Okay.
If human beings are really this reactive,
Yeah.
right? If we are so completely chained to our recent past, how did the United States survive the 2008 crash?
Oh, that is the million-dollar question.
Right. Why didn't the U.S. fall into the exact same multi-decade deflationary black hole as Japan?
Because if we only look in the rearview mirror, and the rearview mirror in 2008 showed a historic financial collapse, shouldn't American expectations have spiraled all the way down to zero and frozen our economy entirely?
They absolutely should have, but they didn't.
Why?
Thanks to an invisible psychological lifeline. Gertler points to a different set of data to explain this survival. The 10-year inflation expectations in the U.S., stretching from 1979 all the way to 2016.
Let's paint the picture of that timeline. In the late 70s and early 80s, inflation in the U.S. was wild. It was running incredibly high.
It was volatile and destructive. And in the early part of that era, the public's 10-year inflation forecast drifted steadily downward, following actual inflation down as the Fed fought it.
Again, that's adaptive, backward-looking behavior.
Exactly. But then something fundamental changes in the late 90s.
What shifted?
The Federal Reserve successfully built an invisible wall in the minds of the public.
An invisible wall.
Yeah. Over the course of the 90s and into the 2000s, the Fed conditioned the American people to believe that 2% inflation was the natural, normal state of the world. They anchored the expectation.
So when the 2008 crisis hit and actual day-to-day inflation plummeted and the stock market was in free fall,
Yeah.
what happened to that long-term psychological anchor?
It held firm. It stayed completely locked.
Wow.
Even while short-term inflation was violently swinging up and down in the chaos of the crash, the 10-year forecast by the American public remained a flat, solid line sitting right at 2%.
It didn't budge.
No, that long-term expectation acted as an anchor in a hurricane. Because people fundamentally believed the world would eventually return to 2% inflation, it prevented the absolute freezing of the economy.
So they didn't stop spending entirely because they still believed money would lose a little value over time.
Precisely. Now, we have to contrast that invisible 2% wall in the U.S. with the great collapse in Japan, the Tokyo route.
Yeah, this is where it gets dark.
The tragedy of Japan is that they had no anchor.
None.
Gertler tracks Japanese inflation expectations starting from 1989. Back in '89, their long-term expectation was sitting at a very healthy 3%.
But then their massive real estate and stock market bubble burst.
Violently. And as the Japanese economy suffered a brutal sequence of recessions throughout the 90s, actual inflation steadily dropped.
Yeah.
By the year 2000, it turned into outright deflation.
Prices were actually falling year over year.
Falling. And because the Bank of Japan had no history of a firmly anchored inflation target, no invisible wall, the public's long-term expectations followed the dying economy down into the abyss.
The anchor snapped. You can track the expectation just bleeding out over 20 years.
Just draining away.
It drops from 3% down to 2, down to 1, hovering dangerously near absolute zero right before the massive QQE intervention in 2013.
Yeah.
Japan was a sunken empire, drifting in deep space without a tether. I mean, imagine living in Tokyo for 20 years and watching the price of a television or a car or groceries drop every single year.
It changes you.
Your brain is going to be permanently rewired. You will delay every purchase possible because everything will be cheaper next month.
So now we return to the spring of 2013.
Right.
The Bank of Japan loudly announces a formal 2% inflation target as part of their massive money-printing stimulus package.
Right.
They are deploying forward guidance. They are begging the public, we promise inflation is going to be 2%.
And this reveals a fatal obsession. Why didn't the public care? I mean, the central bank is shouting from the rooftops. They are printing trillions of yen to prove they mean business. Why didn't the expectations jump back up?
Well, Gertler highlights a cruel reality here. It was famously articulated by Haruhiko Kuroda, the former governor of the Bank of Japan.
What did he say?
Kuroda pointed out that for an economy without a history of an anchored target, individuals require direct physical evidence.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
A public traumatized by decades of falling prices develops a fatal obsession with reality. Words from a central banker are completely meaningless.
So they don't even listen.
Kuroda emphasized that it is not that the public thinks the central bank is lying. They know the bank wants to create inflation. But the public needs to be convinced that the central bank actually has the power to deliver it.
Right, because they've watched the bank fail for 20 years.
Yes. They must see the prices rise with their own eyes before they will change their behavior.
We have uncovered a massive, catastrophic disconnect here. The central banks are playing a theoretical game on a spreadsheet where everyone is a psychic god who perfectly believes their promises.
Right.
But in the real world, in Japan, you have millions of citizens traumatized by deflation who refuse to believe a promise until they can physically hold it in their hands.
Exactly.
It's like putting your hand on a hot stove. Once you are burned, you don't care if the chef promises the stove is off. You aren't touching it until you test it yourself.
That's a great way to look at it. Let's walk through Gertler's mathematical simulations to show just how absurd the spreadsheet fantasy really was, and how he actually tries to fix it.
Okay.
He builds a model to represent the rational fantasy, the Keynesian illusion of paper prosperity.
Let's paint the picture of this fantasy simulation. Imagine the economy falls into a deep liquidity trap. A massive recession hits.
Right.
The natural rate of interest drops below zero for 2 full years. So what does the central bank do in this perfect model?
They rely on forward guidance. They simply move their lips. Yep. The central bank announces, we will hold nominal interest rates at zero for 4 extra quarters after the crisis ends. That's it. Just a promise.
And in the rational model, what happens?
Boom. Instant utopia.
Wow.
The simulation spits out a chart where the recession virtually vanishes the second the promise is made. Output skyrockets. The decline in the economy is incredibly mild and brief.
It's a miracle.
Right. Inflation doesn't even drop. It actually increases right away. Everything is fixed just by talking.
It is the ultimate imaginary victory. The math literally dictates that simply making a promise about 4 quarters in the distant future is enough to completely erase a massive current economic collapse.
It's like if only life worked like a spreadsheet.
Seriously.
But the simulation gets even crazier when they model raising the inflation target.
Oh, let's hear this.
Gertler runs another simulation under that pure rational expectation assumption. The central bank announces, our inflation target is now 100 basis points higher. We are moving the target up by a full 1%.
And in the fantasy model, inflation instantly teleports to that new target.
Instantly.
Zero waiting time. The public's expectations jump the very second the press conference ends. Real interest rates plummet, and the economy is immediately stimulated.
It is a perfect, flawless illusion of super-speed policy transmission.
But Gertler was in the room in Tokyo. He saw QQE fail to produce these teleportation effects.
He did, so he introduces his genius fix. He decides to tear up the traditional textbook and rewrite the core rules of how humans behave inside these models.
Okay, what does he call it?
He introduces a concept called hybrid adaptive expectations.
Hybrid adaptive expectations. I call this the rearview mirror theory with a GPS.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it.
Right.
Gertler argues that humans are complex, so they use a mix of strategies. When it comes to understanding macro aggregates like where the whole economy is going or what the long-term trend of inflation is, people are adaptive.
Meaning they look strictly backward?
Exactly. They need to see it to believe it. They base their future forecasts on a geometrically distributed lag of past data.
Let's break that down. It means if the last 10 years were filled with deflation, my brain automatically assumes next year will be deflation.
Precisely. But Gertler concedes a tiny bit of rationality. He says people aren't entirely blind. They understand what the central bank is trying to do.
Sure, we read the news.
We listen to the news. We hear the central bank's guidance about where interest rates are going. So people are rational about predicting the central bank's direct actions, but they are adaptive about whether those actions will actually work on the broader economy.
That makes perfect sense. I believe the bank will keep interest rates low because they promised to.
Right.
But I absolutely do not believe that low rate will magically fix the economy tomorrow because I haven't seen it work yet.
Right. So Gertler takes his new hybrid humans, agents who act like real, skeptical, historically traumatized people, and he forces them into the exact same simulation.
And this is the face slap moment of the paper.
Yes, it is.
What happens when you drop actual human psychology into the pristine spreadsheet?
The truth plummets. When the central bank announces that exact same policy, we will hold rates at 0 for 4 extra quarters. The magic vanishes.
Poof.
Under rational expectations, that promise almost eliminated the recession. But under hybrid expectations, the actual economic rescue effect shrinks by a staggering 80%.
80%. The policy is almost completely castrated.
The outcome barely changes compared to doing absolutely nothing at all.
Wow.
The output decline is massive and painful. Inflation dips deeply underwater. The promise of lower rates in the future provides only a tiny microscopic bit of stimulus because people understand rates will stay low, but there's no multiplier effect.
There's no explosion of consumer confidence.
None.
And what happens to the instant utopia? When they announce a higher inflation target with these new hybrid humans, does inflation teleport?
It becomes the turtle speed of reality. In the rational model, inflation instantly jumped 1%. Under human psychology, the simulation shows it taking 7 agonizing quarters, nearly 2 full years, just to barely crawl up by a pathetic 0.2%.
7 quarters to move 0.2%.
Yeah.
The agony of reality, it's frozen solid. Because people have to see it to believe it, they won't adjust their expectations until inflation actually happens.
Right.
But inflation can't happen until they adjust their expectations and start spending. It is a brutal, self-fulfilling catch-22.
It is a trap.
Yeah.
But it does slowly, incredibly slowly start to work. In Gertler's model, even with backward-looking expectations, the higher target means lower future real interest rates.
Yeah.
It provides a slow drip of stimulus.
Okay, so there is some progress.
Yeah. So Japan, after launching QQE in 2013, was slowly, agonizingly crawling its way up this curve. Inflation expectations were drifting upward inch by inch.
And then tragedy strikes.
Yeah.
Japan is slowly climbing out of the abyss, clawing its way back to life, and a black swan lands squarely on their heads.
The fatal blow. The years 2014 and 2015 hit. The global oil market unexpectedly crashes.
Oh, no.
Commodity prices absolutely crater worldwide. This is what economists call a negative cost shock.
I want to clarify how devastating this is. Normally, falling oil prices feel like a good thing, cheap gas.
Sure.
But for the Bank of Japan, it is an external sledgehammer. It had nothing to do with Japan's domestic policy, right? It was just global luck, and it was uniquely terrible for their specific goal.
Terribly bad. Gertler runs a final simulation incorporating this external cost shock. Remember, exactly. They think deflation is back. The Bank of Japan failed. It was all a lie. It completely obliterates their fragile new inflation expectations.
A decade of hard work wiped out by a barrel of oil.
Exactly. The cost shock leads to a sharp, violent decline in the long horizon forecast of inflation.
Yeah.
And because expected inflation drops, the real interest rate spikes, which crushes demand, freezes spending, and shrinks economic output all over again.
They fall right back into the abyss.
The black swan completely shattered the first phase of their fragile recovery.
This forces a terrifying realization. If promises about the future forward guidance are completely useless in the real world, and if slow, hard-fought gains can be wiped out instantly by a random drop in global oil prices, what the hell can a central bank actually do? Are they totally powerless to save us?
Well, this leads us to the desperate endgame. Gertler concludes that since forward guidance is fundamentally muted by human psychology, central banks must abandon the future.
They have to let go of tomorrow.
They cannot rely on promises. They must violently attack today.
They have to use their real survival chips.
They must deploy policies that immediately, physically, alter current credit costs without relying on a single citizen's belief about tomorrow.
This explains why the Bank of Japan was forced into such extreme, desperate measures.
Exactly.
Like buying massive amounts of long-term government bonds. Let's break down the mechanics of how that actually helps today.
Okay, so when a central bank enters the market and buys massive quantities of 10-year government bonds, they're artificially increasing the demand for those bonds.
Right.
High demand pushes the price of the bonds up, which mathematically forces the interest rate those bonds pay out down. By physically forcing the current long-term interest rates down, they compress what is called the term premium today.
So it doesn't require psychological promise. It's a brute force manipulation of the current market.
Yep.
If government bond yields are lower, corporate borrowing rates eventually follow them down, making it cheaper for a business to borrow cash right this second.
Yes. And they went even further with the most desperate weapon of all, dropping interest rates below zero, negative interest rates.
It sounds like a typo, but it really happened. How does a negative interest rate physically force action today?
The central bank charges commercial banks a fee for hoarding cash in reserve. They essentially say, if you park your money with us, we will slowly bleed it dry.
So you better use it.
Exactly. This forces the commercial banks to lend that cash out into the economy immediately, aggressively attacking the cost of credit right now. They had to physically force money into the present moment because the public simply stopped believing in tomorrow.
But even Gertler admits there are hard physical limits to this, right?
Well, absolutely.
You can't just buy all the bonds in the world forever, and you can't push interest rates to negative 10% because people aren't stupid. They will just pull all their money out of the banking system and bury physical cash in their backyard to avoid the negative rate.
Precisely. There is a hard limit to how deeply negative rates can go before you trigger a catastrophic run on cash. And there's a limit to bond purchases before you completely distort the entire financial system and own the whole market.
Wow.
Gertler's ultimate conclusion is sobering. Reflating an economy from a liquidity trap takes much, much longer than existing models suggest, even with textbook state-of-the-art monetary policy. And frankly, it requires a tremendous amount of luck.
Let's summarize this terrifying realization. The magic of central bank talk is largely a myth.
It is.
Human psychology demands proof. We are traumatized animals looking constantly in the rearview mirror, demanding that reality match the spreadsheet before we take a single step forward. The smartest economists on Earth built their entire global framework on a delusion of rationality that just does not exist.
And if we tie this back to the listener today, this is where the bell of history starts tolling for the rest of us.
Oh, yeah.
Look around the globe right now. We are currently marching toward massive, unprecedented debt cliffs.
Huge debt.
We have rapidly aging populations across Europe, in China, and eventually in the United States. We are aggressively gathering the exact ingredients, the exact structural recipe that created Japan's trap.
That is the big question. Are we stepping right into Tokyo's footsteps?
If forward guidance fails, if the public eventually rolls their eyes and stops believing the central bank's promises, then is Japan just a unique, isolated case study? Or is it a preview of the entire world's shared destiny?
That is heavy.
When seeing is believing becomes the global consensus, how do we possibly anchor our future?
That is the chill that runs down your spine when you read a paper like Gertler's. It leaves you with a chilling, provocative question that goes far beyond the mechanics of interest rates.
It does.
If monetary policy, the very act of tweaking interest rates and making grand promises, hits a hard psychological wall where the public just stops believing it, what happens in the next global crash?
Because the traditional tools are already stretched to their absolute physical limits.
Exactly. I'll take that a step further. Are we going to reach a point where central banks are entirely powerless?
It's possible.
Where the models and spreadsheets are thrown out the window and only raw, brute force government fiscal spending, literally mailing out physical checks, handing out cash directly to citizens, bypassing the banks entirely can save the economy.
Helicopters dropping money.
Right. And if governments are already drowning in historic, record-breaking levels of debt, where does that cash even come from?
That is the defining economic question of the next decade.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. Next time you read a headline about a central bank making a grand promise for the next 5 years, I encourage you to look at the economic reality around you, check your own wallet, and ask yourself, am I seeing it or am I just being told to believe it?